What's the purpose of a scene? What can we do with reading a character's fortune or giving the group an omen? And when should we just do something completely wild? And how do we really deliver on a wacky experience? All of this came up in episode 3 of Dungeon Master's Actual Play. Let's take a look at this right now. Episode 3 of the Dungeon Master's Actual Play had some really interesting moments as everybody explored the castle of a powerful lord in Ravenloft.
But the keep itself is mysteriously empty. Posts seem to have been abandoned, not in haste, but with some purpose unknown to you.
And again, I'm not going to give spoilers of the episode. I'm just going to talk in generalities about the types of themes and gameplay that came up, and examine them to see how can we learn from that and use that knowledge in our games. It's basically a vehicle for me to talk about cool things that I love about DMing. Let's jump in right now with our first topic.
Inside that shack, is there a map of any sort, or sort of this is where you are, Star?
The first thing we want to look at is how do you know the purpose of a scene so that you can give out the right clues and lore to drive really cool play. In this episode where they're exploring the castle, there is a lot of exploration going on, and Jasmine, our DM, describes a lot of interesting things. The players, however, at times seem unsure of which parts are important or not, and what to do with the information. It feels like Jasmine is improvising a fair amount, perhaps attempting to reward the interaction, which is a great thing to do. But I think there's a lot to learn here if you go back and watch that episode on what the purpose of the scene is and how to make it clear to players what's important or not. For example, a vendor in a marketplace, and this NPC starts telling you about the nobility and the ruling families. How do you know whether that's important, right? Do you need to pay attention to this and jot down the names? Or it's just a random thing that a character is doing, right? Scenes work best when we drive to things that are important, so that the answer is yes, it's important, right? Or it's very obviously not important, but just interesting, sort of like a person who's just complaining about the nobility. And in that case, we can do so by not providing any real details, just the idea that some people are disgruntled, right? And then move to something that's very quickly important and relevant. So if we're examining like tapestries in a room and the DM says, the tapestry is red, and some player goes, oh, that's important, red, and writes it down. We as DM can actually say, whoa, no, let me say, your character would know that they're not seeing anything particularly important. I'm just describing it to you, in the game of this, but your character knows it just happens to be red. That doesn't matter, right? It is okay to explain these things to your characters. Speak to the players themselves so their characters know what they should actually know, right? But ideally, the majority of what we're providing in a scene is important, and we want to drive to the major themes in our play. So if in exploring a castle, the whole point is for you to learn the history of this NPC that owns the castle that they're going to meet, then I want all of these things to add that up.
You realize there's paintings and tapestries adorning the walls kind of all the way up.
Can we have a look at these paintings?
Yeah, what are the paintings of?
Ideally, later there's going to be maybe there's choices, maybe there's puzzles, maybe it's what you say to this person if you're going to actually meet them. We want to think through that and be purposeful in our design, right? Think through where you're going and then provide the information that's going to drive. That doesn't mean there's nothing that's interesting or colorful, but we are framing it in a way that it's useful, right? I might describe their past to let you know the type of person they are, but I'm giving you the info you need for that later choice or to handle that later scene or solve that puzzle. And the rest should be identifiable as sort of color and interesting things, right? And if you need to, sum it up, right? You can always say to your players, hey, you've seen a lot of things. Let me just make sure your characters know that the following things that you found, those clues, this is what's really resonating. You found that thing about the giant battle that took place between them and the land. And you found this thing about who they were married to. You might just even recap like that. That is fine to do. Help your players have a great time and know what's good, while encouraging them to still track notes, right? It's not like you're going to spoon feed them everything, but you're giving them that solid basis, making sure they're on the right path so that it feels positive. Because what you don't want is your players to feel like maybe whatever they touch, they're going to get some lore out of it because you're trying to just be helpful. But then they don't know actually when it is, or it's just something that's colorful, right? So look clear on that. All right. This happens most easily if we decide ahead of time what information to impart, right? The more that we know what's critical, they must learn A, B, and C, then we can point towards that. We can give color around it, but we're making sure that A, B, and C will be imparted in this scene, and they're going to have a blast finding that information, but they're going to come away with those really clear points. So know your purpose ahead of time. It's going to help you make much better gameplay, really help the players feel smart, like they unlocked things, and they're ready to go on to the next scene.
And the room begins to fill with mist. And as it does, you look down at your hands and your bodies, and you realize...
So let's talk about wacky experiences or unusual experiences. I'm not going to spoil the one in this episode, but there is a really wild thing where the characters kind of become a different version of themselves. And this can be super fun in campaigns, right? It absolutely wakes up players. You're one moment, this normal kind of character like you expect, and suddenly you're something else, right? And I've run a number of these types of things over the years, sometimes in organized play, sometimes in home campaigns, where really weird things happen. And this always can be super fun for the players as a concept. Let me give you some examples. You get to play each other's characters. Take your character sheet, give it to the person on your left, right? And now you're all playing different characters because you know what? Your souls swapped bodies. It's your personality, but in their character, now you've got to do this in this room when there's this challenge there. That can be a ton of fun. Or maybe you're playing like a robot version of your character. You just got turned into metal or obsidian, and there's a little additional piece I'm going to give you each, a little card with rules that govern that. Maybe somehow you got into some machine or special thing that now your soul is inside of a monster, and you're all goblins or hobgoblins or I don't know, something even more fearsome. You're all playing vampire spawn and you can crawl up walls, like really cool. Maybe you are a tiny version of yourself or a huge version of yourself. All of these are really wacky ideas, but what they do is wake up play. I was a little surprised to see something like this in episode 3, but what's interesting is it didn't have a lot of mechanic to it, a lot of teeth to it, right? To where you really experience it. And I thought that was a bit of a don't. You don't want to get me excited about how I'm a obsidian version of my character, and then I never get to make a single roll or see what the benefit or impact of it is. Now, maybe we'll see it later. That could be really cool. I'm going to hope for that. But wacky experiences can be really cool. When we do that, we want to make it clear it's a temporary situation. We're not robbing you of the character you came here to play, right? People will often want to play their characters. They spend a lot of time. And so this works best as a sort of change. You've played your character for a while. Now, bam, this situation comes in, changes things up. You're excited to try the, obsidian version of yourself or play the goblin form of you. That can be really neat. And it's going to last until you get through whatever this part of the adventure is. Ideally, it's thematic, right? Like maybe this is a place that deals with dreams, and that there's the dream of a powerful goblin sorceress who headed her whole tribe. And when you, put your hands on these orbs, all of a sudden you go into the last dream of what happened to them, right? Revealing the fate, but you've got to play out that scene. And so you become goblins, and that's neat. And you're doing this specific situation. You can feel as players that it's temporary. That's really cool. The more complex that the new situation or rules are, the more important it is to have clear and less mysterious goals, right? So in that situation I described, if they really understand all this dream stuff is going on, they get the concept, and now all they have to really worry about is playing out the scene with these temporary monster characters, monster stat blocks, right? That's totally fine. If we were to do something really complicated and you're also trying to figure out what's even happening, it can be too much. So think about the amount of mental load you're creating when you're doing wacky experiences and how to keep that unusual aspect manageable, right? Swapping characters is really fun. I first experienced it in the Living Greyhawk organized play campaign. I wrote an adventure on the DM's Guild that you can download, you can purchase. It's called The Howling Void. And in that adventure, there's a part where you swap characters temporarily. But that is a lot of mental load because, if I'm used to playing my Battle Master fighter and now I have to play a monk, right? The two of us have to figure that out. Now we can help each other out, of course, we're right there. But if you also had a very super complicated, mysterious scenario, well, that's a lot. On the other hand, if like in the adventure, the artifact also that I wrote on the guild, I'll have links to these down below. If you pick that one up, in that one, you get to have the sort of essence of a ghost join you and become part of you. And that colors how you play, but doesn't give you a tremendous number of rules. So in the middle of this essentially murder mystery you're trying to solve, you don't have to deal with a lot. It's just this neat color you get to play, possibly gives you a secret, but otherwise it's very manageable. So again, transformations are awesome. Keep in mind how to make them manageable and in tandem with the combination of the scenario and the characters. My advice is, unlike what we see in this episode, don't use transformations solely as exposition. Again, if you describe this awesome obsidian form or robot form, I want to play with that, right? I don't want to just have it end before I got to roll a single die. Great for entertainment, but I think that the players would really enjoy playing these different forms themselves. I had to laugh because I originally called this part of it long exposition, and then I renamed it to talk short because maybe long exposition is itself kind of long. Anyway, Jasmine at various points uses exposition, a long part of talking to the party. She does it particularly when the party exits a place through unexpected means. There's this whole sort of narrative. She tells what is happening as NPCs get involved. There is a sort of story piece. There's a whole sort of like cinematic thing she's describing. Narratively, it is awesome. However, if you're not running an actual play, I don't know that that's ideal. In fact, I think it isn't. Because as DM, you want to provide agency. You want players to be able to respond and add their touches to different pieces that take place. So the normal way that we play, right, is the DM describes something, sets the scene, players respond. If I describe something and set a scene, and then I set another scene, and I take you on a little trip to another place, and I describe how that happens, and then I tell you that it's been resolved, well, that was fun. Thanks for inviting me to your TED Talk or to your novel reading, but I didn't get to play, right? And there are various parts, I think, in particularly this one long sequence that has to do with the transformation. As a player, I would have wanted to have done things in various places there, or at least ask questions. So what's ideal? When you have long exposition, or you would talk long, break it up. Break it up into pieces so you get chunks of exposition, and then you get a moment where something clear can be done. Asking questions, making checks, some clever thinking or actions, right? Allow for those things. Don't make it such a railroad that they can't do anything. Here's another example that I think might be easier to grasp. If you've watched the movie The Hobbit, it takes the idea of escaping in barrels on a river and it makes it into a really cool scene, right? If I were to do that as a DM and you were the player, imagine that I just take you on that river cruise and tell you the whole story, like I was telling you or reading the script of the movie, right? That wouldn't be fun. More fun is to say, hey, okay, so this is what's going on. You're in these, tumbling down the river in these barrels. You look up ahead and you see a bridge and there are foes on it with spears. What do you do to protect yourself? Now that gives you clear agency, right? You've got agency. You've got a moment where you need to do something. There is a specific task at hand, and you might describe getting cover or firing on them. You might describe some cool spell you have. But we keep that going, right? Now we go into, after we get past that scene, we resolve it very quickly. Maybe there's only one round to do things. Now you come up on a set of rocks. They might break the barrels that you're in and prevent you from fleeing. So we make it clear you don't want to do that. So make some checks to steer your barrels or use magic or poke it with your, battle axe or whatever it is, right? We can give various agency moments like that. There's a goblin with a horn that's going to call for reinforcements and tell you that you've gone down a particular fork. Well, that helps. And even that idea of a river fork, right? One side looks narrow with dangerous rocks, but has fewer goblins. Which way do you go, right? This kind of interspersing of agency gives you actually more excitement because your characters, your players are involved. When the players are just listening, they will lose the excitement and agency. even when what you describe is exciting, right? So we want to give options periodically. We want to break up that long exposition, the long talk, with some short, fun segments. There's a really cool part where Jasmine changes her mind, I think. There is a creature that seems to not be able to be saved. Somebody tries to heal it. It fails. And the way the wording comes out, the way that Jasmine reacts to this really implies that we're done here, can't be saved.
Realize that he is beyond what cure wounds could heal.
But then another PC tries something different.
So I come up and goes,
Interesting.
Please let me help you.
Yes.
And this time, Jasmine provides a chance. They make the roll, and this NPC comes back. And that's a really great call, because what's pretty clear in these interactions that are taking place is that the characters actually care about this NPC. They want to have someone on their side, right? And I talked in one of the earlier episodes about the idea of having your voice as an NPC. You probably want this to stay here, this NPC to continue to live, because that NPC can act as your voice, give instructions, help nudge in particular ways, answer questions, criticize gently that, hey, are you really sure you want to do that? So having that NPC that can give you an NPC voice, really useful. Here, Jasmine is at first saying, sorry, this PC has died, which might really fit Ravenloft, right? But when we notice that the players have a strong want, even though this is a Ravenloft campaign where we want to underscore that people die, we give them a chance to get back this beloved NPC. I think that's a pretty cool idea. And we want to keep that in mind, that whatever we've set up, whatever we've built as the adventure, the plot, what the NPCs do, it's all subject to change based on the characters. We want the characters and their players to influence us and convince us to make changes on the fly. That's actually really cool and rewards them. And it's even okay to say so, I wasn't planning on that, but when you made it clear how much you wanted that to be the case, I changed that. When you tell a player that, they will be happy about it, right? So be open to this idea of changing your mind as DM, making a different call based on player wants. Last thing, let's talk about fortunes and omens.
Don't put much stock in this divination.
There are some real benefits in play from having a sort of reading the fortune of your character moment, or giving a portent or prognostication about what's going to happen in a campaign. It can gently nudge a player towards locations or methods, clues where to go. That's what came from the original Ravenloft adventure, that classic AD&D version. It had in it the idea that someone reads your fortune, and each of you get a card that sets various parameters of the adventure.
And with her exhale, a deck of cards forms in the air, kind of inviting you to select one.
It was very clever design, because it meant that each time you ran it, it was a little bit different, but also it was giving clues to the players that would motivate them and nudge them towards these locations or NPCs, and they start wanting to do that. It gives them these goals, which when you've walked through the mists into a place that you don't understand, you need a little grounding. You need some direction and something to shoot for. So going to, say, different towns or areas and saying, hey, do you know about this thing tied to like the morning that I'm looking for? Right? Those kinds of questions are cool. They give you goals and nudges. There are a lot of ways that you can use fortunes or omens in games. I'll give you one that I used once in a Dark Sun campaign I was running. In that world, there isn't a lot of liquid, so to represent that, a lot of potions are in the form of fruit. And when they were in this village, the characters picked up a number of healing fruit, sort of essentially like a potion of healing, but they were been made specially by this sage. And he said, this is for you in times of need. That they have a great power to them, and they're like, okay, sure, whatever. Well, they're made from a certain kind of fruit that they'd learned came from this tree that maybe had some sort of links to the earth and some other neat lore like that. So they were like, yeah, maybe this is important. And the first time someone ate it, they don't just get back the healing, they do. But on top of it, they got a vision. This was something I completely improvised. But what I basically used through this technique was that whenever they would use this potion of healing, and it was a one shot, right? You consume it, it's gone. But when you used yours, you got this vision. And I would improvise what that vision might be. Maybe it's a scene of the villain and what the villain's doing, or the place that you're headed to, or something you might encounter along the way. And by doing that, I could just give you a little edge and a little nudge towards what you're interested in, which was a lot of fun. Something that's going on to an NPC back in the village that you've left behind, right? So these were neat sort of story pieces that I could add. And I had a list of notes of things I might use, but a lot of times I was just improvising it based on the situation. And it was just a really neat way to add color to a scene. And so what players would do is sometimes they would actually wait and say, you know, I'm going to keep this. I kind of want to heal myself right now, but I'm going to use this when we get, you know, into the tomb or into the temple, or when right before I speak to that NPC. And then I know, well, they want to have an edge towards this particular scene. So I would give them something minor, useful, and they'd feel really cool because they now, you know maybe something to talk to maybe they learned that there would be a particular pitfall if you speak to the NPC and mention this, they'll get angry at you, right? A minor thing to just help them for the future scene. Giving people omens about things that might happen, about dangers, curses, all of this can be really cool to do through a fortune. The Taroka deck makes it really interesting because you're dealing a sort of deck of cards that are very thematic in nature, and you are interpreting those cards, right? Whether it's swords or ravens, whatever it might be, towards the adventure. And so if you want to, you can put in that effort to have the fortune that you are reading be very applicable to the adventure in such a way. That's a lot of fun. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can find other methods to do it. But using omens, fortunes, I've actually written about this on my blog. A lot of fun, highly encouraged. So there you have it. Let me know what you thought of episode 3. Are you still watching the show? Are you enjoying it? Were there other lessons that you took out of this DMAP episode that you thought were interesting? Have you tested out the encounters that you can pre-order with the adventure? If you did so, are you taking a look at those encounters? Did you like the latest one that's there? Let me know down below. Thank you to everybody who makes this video possible. You sharing your videos is a great way you can help me. Just tell people about my channel. I hear lots of people say they really liked it, but the views are small. So if you can get my videos, share those links on your social medias with your gaming groups, with friends that you think would be interested, that is a great way to help me. You want to help a little further, you can become one of the Patreon backers and join our awesome Patreon Discord. It's fantastic. Love the community we have. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.